You know, it's pretty wild to think about why some families manage to stay incredibly wealthy for centuries, while others hit the absolute jackpot, only to lose the whole shebang in just a few years. Today, we're diving into an explainer on a concept that completely redefines how we think about wealth. It's called the old money mindset. Now, this isn't about how much money you actually start with, and it's definitely not about having some secret stock tip. It's a specific psychological framework. It's a worldview that keeps families wealthy for generations, protecting them from an economy that is, frankly, structurally designed to extract their money. It's a fundamental shift in how you view every single dollar that comes into your life. To see what I mean, let's look at the stark contrast between new money reflexes and old money muscle memory when a Friday bonus hits the bank account. First, think about the consumer. Say a $9,000 bonus lands in their checking account. Within 45 minutes, it's already mentally spent on an all-inclusive trip to Mexico and a brand new watch. By Sunday evening, the orders are placed, the card is swiped, and bam, the money is gone before it even really arrived. But contrast that entirely with the steward. A 26-year-old receives an $11,000 trust distribution, and before the day is even over, she's quietly on the phone with her family advisor, deploying it into the exact same index funds her grandparents have held for 40 years. It's nearly identical capital, but they are living in two entirely different financial universes.
All right, let's get into part one, the three-generation curse.
So, to understand why that 26-year-old steward acts the way she does, we really have to look at a terrifying financial reality that destroys almost every family fortune out there. This staggering Williams Group research shows that out of every 100 families that build wealth, 90 of them will be right back at zero by generation 3. Just let that sink in for a second. 70% lose absolutely everything by the second generation, and 90% lose it by the third. Only 10% of families actually manage to preserve the wealth they've built. It's a brutal statistical baseline that really forces us to realize that wealth, without a specific survival framework, basically just evaporates.
And what's fascinating is that this isn't just an American issue. It's a universal human problem, recognized in cultures all around the globe, because it's rooted deep in human psychology. Andrew Carnegie famously called it shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. The English say clogs to clogs. The Chinese have a very similar proverb. It spans every economy, every era, and every tax system in the world. Human behavior around sudden prosperity is just remarkably consistent no matter where you look. Let's actually step through the exact generational decay that happens when heirs grow up entirely inside a bubble of wealth. Step 1 is the founder generation. They build obsessively, roll up their sleeves, and save aggressively because, well, they have absolutely no other choice. It's pure survival. Then, in step 2, the next generation lives comfortably, but they still watch their parents struggle late into the night, so they remember the effort. They have a healthy respect for the grind. But then we hit step 3. The third generation grows up entirely insulated by the wealth. They never saw it created. To them, money is just like air. It just exists in the background of their lives. And because they lack any muscle memory of the effort required to build it, they act as pure consumers. The foundation crumbles, and the whole empire goes back to zero. Moving right along to part 2, owner versus steward.
This is where the course shift happens. Instead of asking, what do I want to buy right now, a steward asks, what will best serve this capital across the next 40 years? If you act like an owner, you think the wealth is yours to spend for your own present satisfaction. You know, I earned it, I'm going to spend it. But that 10% of families who actually succeed, they view themselves as stewards. A steward is really just a temporary custodian. You just happen to be holding the family's capital during your specific window of decades. Your main responsibility is to the capital itself, making sure it gets passed down in even better shape than you found it. It's a complete ego check on how we typically view our bank accounts.
And when you give compound interest a runway measured in centuries rather than fiscal quarters, the mathematical results are almost incomprehensible. New money thinks in incredibly tight timelines, the next business quarter, the upcoming summer vacation, or maybe at best a 30-year retirement date. But old money stretches that horizon dramatically. They are literally thinking in 50 to 100-year horizons. They make decisions today specifically to optimize the lives of their great-grandchildren. They absolutely refuse to interrupt the compounding process, treating time as their ultimate employee. When you let money sit and grow for 8 or 9 decades uninterrupted, you harness a financial momentum that is almost impossible to stop.
Okay, part 3, the mechanics of preservation.
So how do they actually pull this off? The old money family that's been wealthy for 150 years got there by buying boring assets and remaining completely invisible, while their friends performed prosperity and lost it all. They absolutely do not chase speculative trends like crypto or the latest AI pump-and-dump plays. Instead, they buy incredibly boring index funds that average around 10% over decades.
Plus, they aggressively practice stealth wealth. They completely shun conspicuous consumption. You are not going to see them flashing giant designer logos or driving brightly colored Lamborghinis. In fact, the median car price for a millionaire is around $31,000. We're talking a reliable Toyota, Honda, or Ford, not a flashy sports car. They fundamentally get that visible luxury is usually just capital destruction wearing a costume of success.
$18 trillion. That number right there is the total U.S. household debt heading into 2026, driven largely by 21% APR credit cards that are treated as just a totally normal background condition of modern life. It's a staggering figure, honestly, and it really highlights how our contemporary culture has completely normalized owing money, treating debt like it's just another monthly subscription fee for living. Ask yourself, how much of your monthly income is already promised to a bank before it even hits your checking account? For most people, it's a terrifying percentage.
But old money realizes that every dollar of interest paid to a bank is a dollar that stops compounding for the family. So they aggressively close the gap between what they can afford and what they actually spend, essentially building a fortress around their assets. The consumer debt trap keeps people living at or beyond their means, paying outrageous interest rates that literally steal their future wealth to fund today's lifestyle. Contrast that with the discipline of restraint. Old money lives well below its means. If they can comfortably afford a $12 million house, they buy a $4 million house and invest the rest. They view consumer debt with deep, deep suspicion, and they only use leverage as an absolute last resort, strictly for genuinely productive assets that will generate cash flow.
That brings us to part 4, the family systems.
Wealth without a specific operating manual always goes to zero, for sure. That's why successful families actually govern themselves like well-run institutions. They rely on 4 massive architectural pillars. First up, deliberate apprenticeship. They do not leave financial literacy up to the public school system. They're teaching their kids to read financial statements and understand compound interest before they even get their driver's license. Second, work is strictly required. You cannot simply live off the trust fund. This stops the entitlement spiral in its tracks and builds that crucial muscle memory of effort we talked about. Third, institutional governance. They actually hold formal board meetings with their family. They use family councils and written constitutions to resolve disputes and make collaborative decisions, ensuring Thanksgiving dinner doesn't turn into a financial war zone. And finally, structural philanthropy. They don't just give on an emotional whim. They set up foundations and long-term giving plans that tether the family's relationship with money to a purpose way larger than just personal consumption.
And the research shows a pretty staggering reality here. Identity theft rates run 43% higher among high net worth individuals. The more visible your wealth is, the bigger target you become. This is exactly why privacy is treated as a massive financial asset. It protects the family from cyber targeting, lawsuits, and social extraction. Old money families guard their financial numbers with serious care. They're not just protecting their bank accounts. They're preserving the authenticity of their family relationships and friendships from the inevitable weirdness and distortions that come with highly visible wealth.
Treating the family as a single financial entity acts as a superpower against an economy designed to extract value. The 20th century really pushed this experiment of the atomized individual, basically making you an isolated consumer forced to navigate the financial world all by yourself, paying retail prices for literally everything. But old money, they operate as a cohesive unit. Decisions about houses, careers, business ventures, and investments are made considering the strength of the entire family network. By pooling their resources, sharing knowledge, and functioning as a private, localized economy, they create this impenetrable fortress that a single, atomized individual could never hope to build alone.
All right, our final section, part 5, becoming the first generation. Here is the most empowering part of this entire explainer. Because worldviews are completely free, you can reverse engineer this mindset starting this exact year. You can be the original founder your descendants will reference a century from now. The Rockefellers weren't always the Rockefellers, right? Someone at some point had to be the very first generation to start thinking this way. You don't need a massive trust fund to begin, you just need the framework. You can adopt the Steward worldview right now, even on a $35,000 salary. You can start prioritizing real financial education, living drastically below your means, avoiding consumer debt like the plague, and thinking in generational time horizons today. The framework is the ultimate multiplier. Build the fortress first, and trust me, the wealth will inevitably follow.
So I want to leave you with this thought. What are your great-grandchildren going to inherit in 2126? Will they inherit a carefully stewarded fortune? Or will your wealth evaporate into that 90% statistic because you chose to act like an owner instead of a steward? The math runs in both directions with equal ruthless reliability. The choices you make with your resources this year
will literally ripple across an entire century. You have the power to choose to skip the expensive, painful generational lessons of new money. You can be the first generation of something that truly lasts. So take a hard look at your framework today. What is your legacy going to look like in 100 years?